All right, and I think we're actually ready to go. I'm Michael Hibblen, and this is Issues That Matter, on the ballot and in the voting booth, presented by the Central Arkansas Library System and the League of Women Voters of Pulaski County, along with KUAR 89.1. I'm Michael Hibblen, News Director. Thank you for joining us for this discussion. Hope you'll bear with us. It's a little bit of a different experience. The other Issues That Matter that we've hosted in the past have been before real audiences. So this is my first time doing this virtually, but we've got a good group of panelists who are joining us. And also want to note that in addition to being streamed live on Facebook, this is also being recorded for broadcast on KUAR. We will air this on Thursday, the 24th, and Monday, the 28th, both days from 7 to 8 p.m. I'm joined by a panel to discuss the statewide proposals that will be decided by Arkansas voters on November 3rd. And even today, we got news that another one of the proposals has been struck from the ballot, so that leaves 3 items that will now be considered. We'll also address Election Day concerns amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Also should note that the League and the Library System will be hosting a voter registration drive, and we will also have details on that coming up a little later as we go along. At the bottom for our viewers, you will see a Q&A button, and that's where you can enter in questions, and we'll also be posting some links for you in the chat window. But first, let's go ahead and introduce all of our panelists. Jay Barth is a distinguished professor emeritus of politics at Hendrix College. He'll be able to discuss the political aspects of these kinds of proposals. He also wrote about the history of direct democracy for the Encyclopedia of Arkansas, the process that allows citizens to put proposals to voters along with the legislature. Jay, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Michael. Good to see you.
Kristen Higgins is Program Associate with the Public Policy Center at the University of Arkansas Division of Agriculture. She put together this year's voting guide, the Arkansas Ballot Initiatives Guide, which she put together for the Division of Agriculture. Very thorough, informative document, and we'll share that as well. Hi, Kristen.
Hi, thank you, Michael, for having us tonight.
You bet. Preston Eldridge is an attorney who has been involved in several ballot proposals and can offer his insight. Preston, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Glad to be here.
And also we've got Kenny Hall with the Arkansas State Chamber of Commerce, Executive Vice President of Governmental Affairs. He's been with the group 22 years, is its single lobbyist. And the structure for this is not necessarily to debate all of the issues, the 3 remaining issues, though we will be going into opinions for and against issue 3, because that would change the overall process of how these are put to the ballot. But Kenny Hall, along with the State Chamber of Commerce and the Arkansas Farm Bureau, are supporting the constitutional amendment. Hi, Kenny.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for inviting me. Glad to be here. Look forward to visiting with everyone.
And opposing issue 3, Melissa Fults, who has led several marijuana-related proposals and has served as program director for the nonprofit organizations Arkansans for Compassionate Care, which oversaw the successful campaign for the medical marijuana amendment in 2016. Melissa, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
And finally, we've got Joshua Price, a commissioner with the Pulaski County Election Commissioner, who can talk about the election process, including absentee voting amidst concerns of the coronavirus pandemic, also the need for poll workers. Hi, Joshua.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to this discussion and to help clear up any misinformation that's out there about the elections.
Well, why don't we start there, Joshua? Because there is so much concern about voting. The whole suggestion from President Trump that the widespread use of absentee voting or voting by mail is going to allow widespread fraud. First, tell me how this has been different for the Election Commission this year compared to, say, other presidential election years, the kind of stress that you guys have been under.
Right. Well, full transparency, I wasn't with the Election Commission on the last presidential election. However, from working with our staff, I mean, there's definitely, it's a lot more time. I mean, obviously, the health of our staff and our workers is of utmost importance. I don't think a lot of people know this, but the Pulaski County Election Commission only has 6 full-time employees. So that's 6 full-time employees that are basically trying to train and coordinate 1,000 poll workers, 12 early voting locations, and 108 precinct locations on election day, and coordinate all of that. We're very mindful of the health of our staff and our poll workers, because if any of them were to become ill with the coronavirus, it would really, create a domino effect throughout the system. So we're being very, very careful to make sure everyone's working from home as much as possible, socially distancing. Our trainings for our poll workers, normally we have 100 per training. Now we have like 20 in the room at any given time because of the need for social distancing. We're having those round the clock daily to make sure we have enough poll workers trained for the election. And then, of course, there's the huge uptick in absentee ballots. Last presidential year, we had about anywhere between 5,000 to 6,000 absentee ballots come in. And this year, we're already almost up to 15,000 as per the county clerk's numbers. So we're definitely seeing a lot of changes this year, doing what we can to keep people safe, but really also make sure we have as many options available as possible for our voters, whether they want to vote absentee, early vote, or in person on election day.
And elaborate a little. What advice are you giving to people who say, are concerned, maybe don't want to go to a polling place? Should they request an absentee ballot, or should they plan for early voting when there might be shorter lines?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I would say create a plan and stick to it. If you are of that population that's a little bit more susceptible to COVID-19, whether you're older or you have a compromised immune system, I would strongly suggest you vote absentee, as is your right to do so. However, if you are out and about, if you're going shopping, if you're going to restaurants, and you feel comfortable wearing a mask and being in public, then I would strongly suggest that you go ahead and early vote. And then, of course, you have the option to vote on the day of the election. And we've got a little bit of an expanded model this year. Thanks to our quorum court and our Pulaski County Election Commission, we came up with a plan to create kind of a modified hybrid vote center plan. I know everyone's heard the word vote center, but basically our 11 early voting locations, which we've expanded to 12. We added one more location on Napa Valley. We're going to keep those 12 locations open on election day, and they will remain kind of early vote centers, but they'll be vote centers, whereas anybody in the county can vote at any of those 12 locations on election day. So 2 weeks up to the election, starting on October 19th, the voters can go to any of those 12 locations in the county to vote. It doesn't matter where you live in the county. If you are from Sherwood and you happen to be in Maumelle, you can vote in Maumelle. If you're in Maumelle and you happen to be in Little Rock, you can vote in Little Rock. So that's early voting. And then on election day, we're going to keep those 12 locations open as well. And the voter can either vote at any of those 12 locations or at their regular precinct where they normally vote. So that gives the voters a lot more options on election day and extended hours on early voting as well.
And when we think of traditionally the poll workers, as has been noted elsewhere, they are seniors, and a lot of those folks who are most at risk of the virus are hesitant. Do you have enough poll workers, or are you still looking for more to man the polls?
Well, that is a great question, Michael. And I have to say, I have to thank the people of Pulaski County for really stepping up. This was something that from the beginning we were very worried about. The average age of a poll worker in Pulaski County is 73. So obviously that is a very vulnerable population. And a little bit of a alarming statistic, we had more poll workers over the age of 90 than we did in the 18 through 25 range. So we really were looking for younger poll workers to kind of take the pressure off of this more vulnerable population. And I have to say the people of Pulaski County really stepped it up. It takes about 1,000 poll workers to run an election smoothly in the county. And at the beginning of kind of when we did the survey, see who was willing to participate. Only about 430 said that they would. But I'm very pleased to say that due to the efforts of the Election Commission and the County Clerk's Office and all our different partner organizations who have been helping spread the word, we have received over 1,000 new applications for poll workers. We're training them as fast as we can. So I think we're going to be good for poll workers. So the county really did step up to that rally and jumped in and helped. So I really am very appreciative to the people of Pulaski County for jumping in and helping us in our time of need. And I think we're going to be good to go on the poll workers this year.
And finally, what do you think of the comments about a rigged election or fraudulent voters when it comes to absentee voting?
Yeah, I know that's a popular narrative right now, but to be honest with you, that the numbers just aren't there. The proof isn't there. I've been on the Election Commission about a year and a half now. We've overseen the primary election in March, as well as many special elections. We have not had one incident of voter fraud via absentee ballot. The director of elections, Mr. Brian Poe, I've spoke to him at length. He's been there 12 years. He's never seen an incident of voter fraud via absentee ballot. So it's just not really a thing, to be honest. And I think there's an important distinction here to make as well that maybe a lot of people don't understand. Again, some misinformation. Not just anybody can turn in an absentee ballot. You have to already be a registered voter. So when you turn in that absentee ballot application to the clerk's office, you already have voter registration on file. So you're not a random person that's just, sending in a ballot. You turn in an application, you're already registered. They accept that application, you're sent a ballot in the mail, and then you can either send that ballot back or you can deliver it in person at the clerk's office. And then on election day, the Election Commission then opens and processes those ballots. So there's many different checkpoints from your initial voter registration with the clerk's office, which they compare with your absentee ballot application. And then when you get your absentee ballot, you send it back in and it's taken to the Election Commission's office, and then they open up your packet. They then again compare your red sheet voter statement with your application that you turned into the clerk's office and make sure all your information matches up. So there are several checkpoints along the way. And again, I have not seen any type of voter fraud throughout this entire process. So I would say that to the viewers, really just kind of put your mind at ease and not worry about that. I would say worry more about getting out to the polls or sending in your ballot and voting. And let's make our voices heard this election and have some great turnout.
And before we move on, I'll go ahead and take one question from a viewer, Gal Sammartino. Is early voting electronic rather than paper ballots?
That is correct. Early voting will be electronic, but they will also have some paper ballots available for those who opt to use those. Sometimes people can read, if they can read the paper ballots easier, so there will be some paper ballots there, but it will be primarily electronic.
Okay. Jay, Barth, let's talk a little about, we'll delve into the proposals here in the history, but what's your impression in the lead up to this election and the uncertainty that has been brought perhaps by the president regarding the process?
Well, I would just reiterate what Joshua laid out. I think he said it very well in terms of what the real safety and sanctity of the process. It's taken very seriously. The political science literature on any prevalence of voter fraud just isn't there. There's been a lot of research on it. It just doesn't happen. And whatever minimal error happens there is certainly outweighed, I think, by the ability of more folks to participate in the democratic process. So I think Joshua did a great job of talking about those safety valves are in place here to take care of those issues.
And regarding the ballot issues this year and initiatives and referenda, you've written about the history of this aspect of direct democracy. for the Encyclopedia of Arkansas, and I'll post that now to the chat box. But first, tell me how we came to the current process in Arkansas for posing measures to voters on the ballot.
Yeah, from the time of the last Constitution, I mean, there was always a possibility of the legislature putting prospective constitutional amendments on the ballot for the voters to consider. But what is really exceptional about Arkansas is the fact that it also allows this process through which, through the signature of petitions, that either constitutional amendments, initiated acts, or referenda, which is the evaluation of laws that have already been passed about whether the people still want them to stand, that all those forms of direct democracy are in place in Arkansas. And that's a creation of a little over a century ago. It was really the conjoining of two political movements that had been underway in the decades leading up to that. The Populist Movement, which was a movement that was deeply cynical and critical of economic elites that they felt too often had control of the policy-making process. They wanted more of the kind of rank-and-file citizen voice in deciding what the policy of the state should be, along with the Progressive Movement, which was a movement that was deeply concerned about corruption in the process and felt that oftentimes that lobbyists had too much influence over legislative decision making. And really they kind of came together, merged together for this movement for direct democracy in Arkansas in those three forms. The William Jennings Bryan, who was the most visible populist of that era, stampeded the state. He was an amazing orator, covered the state, really making the appeal for direct democracy. It took a couple of elections and a variety of court decisions that I won't go into, but ultimately Arkansas does have direct democracy, has had it for now nearly a century. And Arkansas really stands out in the South. It is direct democracy is very much a kind of Western phenomena, although states elsewhere have picked it up. Arkansas really stands out in the South as being a place where the people can really get measures on the ballot. Now, in recent decades, especially in the last decade, there have been some efforts to kind of put some constraints on that through legislative actions, but the basic structure remains very much in place. Obviously, one of the amendments that is on the ballot through the legislature this year, Amendment 3, Issue 3, which would add a constitutional amendment, it would change how direct democracy works pretty fundamentally. But it is a grand tradition in Arkansas. In some decades, it's been used a lot. In other decades, it's not been used a lot. Sometimes there are very high passage rates. Sometimes there are very low passage rates across the last decades. But it is something that has been a kind of cornerstone of the Arkansas policy-making process for a while. And I think some folks would probably like some of the things that have been put in the Constitution through the petition process. Other people would probably not like some of those things, but it has been a way in which the people have really spoken about the policies of the state.
And briefly sum up, and then maybe we can get some opinions about the Issue 3. But in what ways would this change how citizens can put items on the ballot?
Well, it would do several things. It would limit how many issues the legislature could put forward. It would also, right now, the kind of magic date for getting signatures in for the first round is around the 4th of July. It would move that up several months. It would also really require that proponents of the petition process get all of their signatures in, good signatures in at that earlier date. There would no longer be the so-called cure period that has been a really important part of the process, in which as long as folks have a sufficient number, they can then go back out, or sufficient number of signatures, they can then go out and have an additional period of time to collect more signatures to get the number that will be that are good signatures, that are reliable signatures where there's a match between the signature and the registered voter. I think others could probably talk more to some of the specifics of that, but those are some of the main provisions. It would not take away the process entirely, but it certainly would limit it in some ways. And I think in the eyes of some, it probably would ensure that it has to be folks who have a lot of money and a professionalized process to really make it work. And it would really take away the kind of grassroots process that has been employed at times over the years.
I invited the two legislators who are backing this to join us tonight. Both said they had other obligations, but did refer me to Kenny Hall with the State Chamber of Commerce. First, tell me why the State Chamber, as well as the Farm Bureau, are backing this.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. Hello, Jay. Haven't seen you in a long time.
Hello, Kenny. Good to see you.
Ironically, our involvement in this issue kind of dates back to the first day of my career, which started in this month 22 years ago. And when I walked in the door, there was an effort a ballot initiative effort to repeal property taxes in Arkansas. And we, the State Chamber and the Farm Bureau, joined a group called APPLES, which stood for Arkansans Protecting Police, Libraries, Education, and Services. And that group included the cities and the counties associations. I believe, but I'm not positive, it included the League of Women Voters. And so that process, what it showed us is there was an issue that probably people were going to vote for without stopping to think about the impact of losing that much state revenue that funded schools, cities, counties, all sorts of libraries. So it was a very dangerous proposition, and I think we defeated it in courts in '98 and 2000. But that process continued, and that's when we kind of started thinking about looking at ways to address the process. There really couldn't generate any momentum until 2018 came along, and we had the tort reform battle, and both sides in that issue raised a total combined of $6 million and started running their campaigns in August, like all campaigns start. And then along comes the Supreme Court decision in mid-October and throws the whole thing off the ballot. Well, that did nobody any good. I mean, you already had ballots printed. That didn't help the election people. It didn't help the county clerks that had done all the work preparing for the election. And it sure as heck didn't do any good to all the people that had contributed $6 million, whether you were for or against the issue. It had nothing to do with what the issue was. It just defeated the whole process. So the number one goal we had was to eliminate that situation where the court came in at the last minute. We just felt like it was highly necessary to get those decisions before the court goes on their summer recess and before all that money is collected and spent on the campaigns. Jay, it does not change the legislative referral options. They can still refer up to 3. And then I think a red herring that's kind of come into this is about the legislative salaries. It's kind of funny. The legislature has the authority to add a 4th referral only for legislative salaries, which they've not used it in my lifetime, and we have that panel now that does that, so it's really unnecessary. But we thought the public would like to see it harder for the legislature to put measures on the ballot and chose that 60% vote threshold. So when you go in to rewrite the Constitution, you've got the piece that had the up to 3, and then you had the other piece that allowed the 4th potential for raising salaries. And so a lot of people have read that to think, oh, they're trying to raise salaries. No, it's just changing the vote percentage that the legislature has to achieve to make any kind of referral. And then I know a lot of people are talking about the 15 to 45 counties. And our view of that is it's exactly the opposite of what most people are afraid of. Most are saying it's limiting people's involvement. Our argument is it's actually increasing the number of people's involvement. You know, most, and you mentioned the money and professional process. I know you've studied this as close as I've lived in it. That's what's going on right now. And I think I've even read news stories just in the last month or two where basically they admitted they've got people in those 15 counties that ready to sign anything, and they're run by out-of-state paid canvassers that are coming in here. So we just believe everybody in every county should have the right to at least have a say in what gets on the ballot. And then the most important thing is it's not changing anybody's ability to vote. Everyone could still vote for whatever they want to once it gets on the ballot. We just are trying to expand the opportunities of people to say what gets there and what does not get there.
Melissa Fults, how would this impact your efforts? You've faced repeated challenges over the years to get marijuana-related proposals on the ballot. If issue 3 passes, what would this do for you?
Well, first of all, I completely disagree with nearly everything he just said. As Jay said, this will make it much more difficult. As a matter of fact, it will basically put the last nail in the coffin. When you have legislators walk up to you and tell you that the people have no business making laws, that it's not their job and they should not have that right, I have a problem with that because we do have a constitutional right. They have, since 2013, they have whittled away at the petitioning process. And when they sit there and say that they want to make it where the grassroots, that it's truly a grassroots effort, is a lie. A grassroots effort can never do what they're trying to do now. And doing the 45 counties, you have 5 months less time to get signatures. And if you're working with volunteers like we've done the majority of the time, it takes a long time when you've got, 25 or 30 volunteers that are working full time or have other issues or have families trying to get it and gather signatures. That 5 months is critical. And the things of the 45 counties, it's very difficult. We get signatures from nearly every county, and we work really hard to get as many as we can from every county. But if you're going to make it where you have to get that minimum amount from 45 counties, that's going to be almost impossible for a grassroots effort. And unless you're going to have $5 to $10 million and people coming in from out of state in order to get those signatures, the petitioning process is dead. It's nearly dead now. And if y'all see what happened to the ballot initiatives that got the signatures and did everything right, there are loopholes in the ones that they passed for 2020 in this last legislative session that puts a loophole that they can throw out anything they don't want. And that's their entire intention, to make sure that the people's voices have been killed. They are stifling our voices, they're stifling our rights, and this amendment will put the last nail in the coffin. And I mean, it's horrible.
Kenny, I'll give you a chance to respond in a moment, but first wanted to go to Preston Eldridge. You have successfully defended the minimum wage proposal before the state Supreme Court a couple of years ago. You've also addressed issues ranging from the collection of signatures to the petition process. What's your take here? I know you've said you're opposed to issue 3. You're not actively involved in any campaign, but would you agree with what Melissa just said?
Yes, thank you, Michael. Yes, I would agree generally with what Melissa said. And really, I have 2 kind of core issues with issue 3. First is the process, with issue 3 getting on the ballot and what it says, and it does not inform the public, in my opinion. And that is a separate issue that I think is worthy for this panel to talk about, the differences in what the process for the legislature to get proposed amendments on the ballot versus the people. And I think that's a critical issue here, because when you read the ballot title of issue 3, it does not tell voters what this does. And it is a patent fraud on voters, I believe. I mean, amend the process for the submission, challenge, and approval of proposed initiated acts, constitutional amendments, and referenda. How many people will read that on the ballot and understand the extent to which this amendment will change the Constitution and the process? Nobody. And in the courts and in the cases in Arkansas, it distinguishes the processes and it gives some reasoning behind that, largely based on the fact that it says these things have to be published in the newspaper, and because it's the legislature, they're somehow better than the rest of the citizens, essentially, which I take issue with. But newspaper readership has plummeted in the last 10 years. I think the percentage of voters that are actually going to have access to the substantive language is going to be relatively low. Not educate people on what the amendment would do, and I have a problem with it, and different than ones that are brought by the citizens, because they have to educate people in the ballot title as to what they do, and there's a standard they're held to. So again, the first issue is just the process that by which issue 3 gets on the ballot. I think it's fraudulent to voters. The second is the substance to what it does. Very generally, I mean, there's a lot of minutia in what it deals with, but very generally, the process we have now is, pretty friendly to our rights as citizens to vote on these issues. And it gives, at the end of the day, gives the citizens the right to vote and decide on it, whether that's good or bad. There have definitely been issues that have been on the ballot and have passed that I've disagreed with. And then there's some that I've been in favor of. But the process as it stands now is right. It generally takes it away. It shifts the burden at every juncture against the voter. One example that's a minute detail: if things get into court cases, it appears that the amendment would shift the burden on proving whether or not a petition is valid or not. And so right now, a petition is presumed valid if it's challenged in court, and the person challenging it has the burden to show that it's invalid. Essentially meaning the person who signed that has a right to sign it, and their right is valid until someone proves that the signature is wrong. It flips that. Now someone has to come and defend it and prove that valid, potentially bringing someone who signed it into court to testify about something they signed months ago. This shift anything, and for that, is kind of why I am definitely against the issue.
I will share here a link to the UA Division of Agriculture and the report that was put together here, which shares a lot of the direct language, Preston, that you just shared. We'll delve into the other issues, and we'll also get to some of the questions, but Kenny Hall wanted to give you a chance to respond to what we just heard there.
Sure. Thank you very much, Michael. A lot to respond to. I'll start with just kind of sticking to the language of the proposal. The dates. I've already mentioned how I don't see how it benefits anyone to have these lawsuits throw the cases off, whether you're for or against it, in October. And so the dates were chosen kind of backwards. We talked to lawyers who worked on the cases to get an idea how long they needed to prepare the cases. We also did not want to leave the election year, so that's January 15 kind of gets the earliest you could go in the year. And then we allowed time for legal reviews to go over what gets filed, and that's where we chose the April 15 deadline to file the lawsuits. And that date was also kind of in between the filing and the court's recess, which is sometimes certainly August and maybe even in July. So we wanted to give them close to 2 months for the judicial process, to have 2 full months to review and to decide. Now, Melissa's comment about the time, I think the first cycle, if this passes the first cycle, that's probably true to some degree. After that, it's not. You just start at a different process time. Yeah, so that's one of the red herrings. The burden of proof thing Preston mentioned is not a planned part of that, and I can't say that it's changing anything. I can't deny that it's changing anything. That's kind of an open legal issue there. What happened is we chose to eliminate the cure period because it allowed 30 days, and if you put that in there, then you move that whole process I just described back 30 days, and we were going to get too close to the court's recess for the cases to be concluded. So that 30 days was really not, we didn't have time for it to stay in the election year. So the section in the Constitution that addressed the cure period is the part that had the burden of proof piece. And so when you eliminated that section, it took that piece with it. And no intent for that to apply, it just went away with it. I would argue legally that that section only applied to the cure period. But, you know, lawyers are lawyers, and you can always make all kinds of arguments in both directions. There's always going to be a burden of proof. I know there was an opinion article out of South Arkansas that said there would be no burden of proof. Well, common law is always going to put a burden of proof on the plaintiff. Grassroots. I mean, I knew we were going to disagree. I'm not surprised. Well, it'd be boring if we didn't disagree here tonight. But the definition of grassroots is more people. And, you know, I don't understand why we should only allow the people in the 15 largest populated counties to be the ones that we go talk to. If I'm in Pike County, I'd like to talk to someone. I'd like to be educated. Preston, you talked about the petitioners educating the voters on the issue. Well, why don't I deserve to be educated in Pike County or Chico County or Cross County or wherever? I doubt there's been many of the minimum number of signatures acquired in those smaller populated counties. So that's the purpose of all of that. And again, you talked about the legislature. Again, we went right back to the very top of the list, make it harder for the legislature to refer a matter. And I know a lot of people say, well, the Republicans have 75%, and it'd be real easy to get 60%. Well, that's not true. There's usually about 20 joint resolutions filed in the House and another 20 filed in the Senate, and they're debated through the entire session. And with 75% of the Republicans, probably 75% or more of the proposals are by Republicans. So they are automatically fractured, and it becomes a matter of negotiations and discussions and debate to come up with the 1, 2, or 3 that they're actually going to refer. So I believe we have addressed all of the differences, but, you know, I understand it's a free country and people can have their opinions here.
Kristin, let's go to you. Again, you put together this Arkansas ballot issues guide, which is a neutral research-based guide. You pretty equally present all opinions. Let's talk about what's left on the ballot now. What have we had 3 that have ballot issues that have been knocked off, including one today. We had the Arkansas Supreme Court step in regarding issue 6. The court ruled that the campaign behind this referendum, this concerns who can handle eye surgeries. The campaign did not comply with the law requiring them to certify that their paid canvassers passed a criminal background check. The law enacted last year allows optometrists to perform several procedures that had previously been limited to ophthalmologists, and this law, in the effort to overturn it, prompted an unusually public and expensive lobbying fight. But let's talk about what is left on the ballot, and maybe actually I'll start with a question. Bruce Erickson asked, is the number of items not approved for voters, approval or rejection on the ballot normal, or is this rejection rate of initiatives high this year?
Well, so going back into history, there's been many years where ballot issues have been struck from the ballot, and So I would say that this year is not abnormal, but the process that happened this year, some of the minutia or the intricacies of the court cases were based on recent state law changes that kind of made it a little bit more difficult this year for those sponsors. But historically, there's been two, issues or three issues removed from the ballot. And a couple years ago, we had that same thing. We had three initiatives or three different proposals struck from the ballot. So it's not abnormal. So this is the first year in probably a little bit over a decade that we haven't had a citizen initiative on the ballot. And so we do have three that are remaining from the legislature. You all talked about issue 3. And then we also have issue 1, which would create have a half-cent state sales tax. It would make permanent a sales tax that is in place right now that is funding state, county, and city roads. And that half-cent sales tax that voters approved in 2012 is set to expire in June 2023. So issue 1 would make permanent a sales tax for road work that would go into effect in July 2023 if voters approved it. So we have that on the ballot, and that affects roads and funding in state, county, and cities. And then we have issue 2, which would change the state's term limits law, the term limit amendment. It would end lifetime limits for the state legislature, and it would lower the number of years that legislators could serve. Right now, state legislators can serve 16 years throughout their lives in the legislature. It could be all in the Senate. It could be all in the House. That's something that voters approved a couple of years ago. Going back in history, we had term limits first approved in the 90s. And then, in 2014, voters changed the term limits to what we have now, to that 16 years over their lifetime. Issue 2 would change it to end the lifetime limits, and then legislators could serve 12 years in a row, and then they would have to take a break before they could run for re-election if they wanted to. And so that's a pretty, significant change to go from a lifetime limit to 12 years in a row of consecutive service.
Yeah.
And so those are those are the 3 issues that are on the ballot right now.
And by the way, I do welcome any of you to chime in on any of this. But Jay, to go back to you, why does there seem to be so much confusion? I understand when you need a certain number of signatures, there are going to be some that end up being fraudulent. But this, what was decided today, and the 2 others really comes down to a definition of what are background checks. Why do we have this confusion?
Yeah, I mean, it's a new area of the law that, and Melissa said earlier that there have been a series of new laws passed related to the process of gathering signatures in recent years, and this really was an area of that legislation that was not precisely defined, leading to some question about what the law actually was. Preston is much better on this issue because of his of some of his background with that issue. So I'd probably defer to him on the specifics of that part of the legislation. I would speak more generally, though. I think that because first off, it is a cumbersome and complicated process. There are lots of stages to the process, and that means there are lots of stages where there is the potential for litigation along the way. From the ballot title itself, of course, the appropriateness of the petition gathering process, whether it's been posted in the proper number of newspapers, all those kinds of things lead to points of entry for conflict. And we have had a lot of litigation around this issue. And Melissa knows very well that In 2016, we had 2 marijuana amendments that were initiatives that were on the ballot, and one was struck at the last minute. Hers, the one she had proposed, another went forward and passed. So it is an area where there's just always been a lot of litigation at different stages of the process. But I'll leave it to Preston to talk about that specific piece.
Preston?
Sure. I think the questions about kind of the background check issue and why some of these recent proposed amendments were struck off the ballot. My understanding, I was not involved in those cases, so I'll give that caveat. But my understanding is that, the litigation was not about, in fact, whether some of the canvassers passed background checks or got background checks. It was about the certification language that the campaigns is submitting. So this was all a fight over the certification language, not whether, in fact, these canvassers did get a background check. And what I think, this is it's in the minutia, it's in the weeds. But I think when you zoom out and look at the big picture, there are all these little things that at the end of the day disenfranchise citizens and their rights to sign the petition and ultimately vote on these issues. And that's what I think, it's obviously a part of the process now, and it's going to be even worse, in my opinion, and be much more disenfranchising with issue 3.
And Kristen Higgins wrote in the chat box that you can see exactly what the law says in a previous newsletter from the Public Policy Center, and she includes a link there. That also relates to 2 questions that we have. Laura Bridges, I believe that most people who want a law or amendment feel their representatives will not listen to them or pay attention, that grassroots movements to get on the ballot are the only way to get those voices heard. We had another, this one from an anonymous viewer who said, are you concerned that after the recent court decisions, there are no longer any citizen-approved issues on the ballot? Of the 3 left, one attempts to amend an initiative approved by voters in the previous election. I assume that's the term limits. Is the Arkansas legislature trying to suppress citizen rights? I open that up to anyone. Melissa?
They are absolutely trying to suppress our voice. As I said, the last changes that they made in the last legislative session made it nearly impossible, as we have seen with these 3 ballot initiatives that have been thrown off. It wasn't the fact that they didn't get the signature, the background checks. It wasn't the fact that the people failed the background checks. That one little word they didn't put in, that the people passed the background check. Well, if you get a background check and they've got all these felonies, you're not going to let them gather your signatures. It's just ridiculous what they are doing. And this issue 3 they told us at the beginning that this issue 3 was going to go along with what they did in 2019. And they can say it's going to make it where only grassroots can do a petition, but that's very, very far from the truth. They want to kill the petitioning process, and as we have seen with what they did this time, with the Election Commission having the authority and with the wording that they put in 2019, they can throw off any initiative that they want to throw off by twisting whatever those little words say. And this issue 3 will complete that process. And there will be no way. I mean, you can say, well, if you have enough money, you can get it on the ballot. But we've seen they spent a lot of money I know they had like $5 million. I'm not sure how much they ended up spending, but they had a lot of money to get these petitions and these signatures done, and they still got thrown off the ballot because of the little bitty technicalities that have done. And with issue 3, that will be the final straw on the petitioning process, and the people will no longer have a voice. And that is exactly what our legislature wants. They've told me that themselves. I mean, when I have a half a dozen of them that have told me we don't have any business making laws, that's their intent, and this will absolutely finish the process.
Do you plan to continue putting any more proposals before voters?
Well, to tell you the truth, I'm retiring. You can only get knocked in the head so many times till you finally say, enough is enough. I will be assisting in some of them, and I will help in any way I can. But one thing that I do want to point out, when Mr. Hall said that you can just get started earlier, no, that's not true. They've already set it up that you cannot start until a certain date. You cannot start until after the last election. So you lose 5 months of signature gathering. And another thing he said is they only get the 15 largest counties. That's not true. As a matter of fact, Pike County was one of our 15 counties. And I think Perry County was too. We had several very small counties. So you're wrong about that. You're wrong that we're only going to the largest counties. Obviously, you haven't really looked at who of what the counties are that they use for their 15 county process. This is just clear and plain. And another thing that like they were talking about the ballot title. When we do a ballot initiative, you have to have every single major issue that's in your petition on that ballot title. They don't have to do anything like that in the legislature. I mean, looking at that ballot title, I agree. You don't have any clue what it is. Oh, they're going to change the ballot initiative. Must make it better. Okay, that's how it got passed in 2013. Is they misled people, or 2014, they misled people. They made it sound like it was making it better, and it's not. So this whole thing is to kill the people's voice. And whether I personally do another ballot initiative or not, there are a lot of people that will want to do ballot initiatives that the legislature refuses to do anything about, and they're not going to be able to. And, maybe if you have $5, $6, $10 million, maybe. But I don't know a lot of people that have that kind of money. So this is definitely going to be a problem.
Okay, well, we'll move on shortly. Kenny, would you like to offer any final response on this?
Sure, thank you. The $5 million number is interesting to me. Jay, I read with interest your history here just a few minutes ago, and I love your phrase, policy entrepreneurs. We agree with what you've written there, that's what we've seen in the last decade is policy entrepreneurs, well-funded. That's why they have $5 million. That's not grassroots, folks. That's somebody looking to make a living off the ballot. I think we have to stop and think for just a minute. We're talking about the state's constitution. It should be considered a sacred document. It's not intended to be changed often. It should never be easy to change it. That's the process. The other thing that really concerns me is I'm sad that people believe their legislators will not listen to them. They get elected by votes, and I know the general public believes that lobbyists talk them into everything and they never listen to their voters. That's not true. We lobbyists provide education that is helpful to them to understand things. But whenever I'm talking to a legislator, or if I want them to vote for something, I have their constituents talk to them. It's the constituents that carry the power, and that's the people. And then, the discussion about the legal stuff can make us all go dizzy and blind trying to figure all of that out. But there's one thing that's missed here, and that it's the court that is making these decisions. Yes, the legislature makes the laws, but the court applies the laws and makes the decision. So it's not the legislature throwing anything off the ballot. It's the court interpreting the laws and throwing them off the ballot.
For those who are just joining us, this is Issues That Matter on the Ballot and in the voting booth, presented by the Central Arkansas Library System and the League of Women Voters of Pulaski County. I guess we'll wrap up our conversation by going back to you, Joshua. I know we've had several questions regarding early voting and the issues here. Let me see if I can pull a few of these up. First off, will we have early voting locations open on weekends?
Yes, they'll be open on weekends from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. On Saturdays. I'm sorry, not Sunday, but on Saturdays.
And going back to comments from the president, are there any assurances that voters who choose to vote by mail will actually have their votes counted? The person writes the biggest fear they have is that if I vote by mail, it will be discarded as fraudulent because of the suggestions made by President Trump.
Well, no. So just to kind of put their mind at ease, as long as that absentee ballot packet is received by November 3rd and the packet is complete, which means you've got your copy of your ID, or you sign the optional verification of identity. So just to expand on that a little bit, you do have to provide a copy of your ID. However, on your red voter statement form, there's an optional verification at the bottom that says, basically, I don't have my ID in this packet. However, I am testifying and swearing that I am who I say I am. So if you sign that, then the clerk can check you out and verify your identity, and then your vote can be counted. So as long as you fill out that form correctly, your name, your date of birth, your address, your signature, and then you sign it and everything, and it's received by the due date, then it should be counted with no issues.
Also a question, when will I get my absentee ballot in the mail?
Well, I actually checked with the clerk's office, and those are being mailed tomorrow. So I would assume probably next week.
Do we know what the rejection rate of live voters of the early current date of an election? I'm not sure if I'm making sense on that.
Yeah, so that gentleman asked a question earlier about the rejection rate for absentee ballots. It's about 10%, and that is largely due to user error. A lot of times the voter statement is not even included in the packet, or it is not filled out correctly. It's missing information. I would say to your viewers, if you're voting absentee, when you fill out that voter statement, it's red so that it's like an alarm going off. Here it is. Make sure you fill it out correctly. Double check it, triple check it, fill it out like you're filling out your taxes. Don't use a nickname. Please use your government name. Now, we are not nitpicky about names if it's intuitive. My name is Joshua. If it's Josh, we know that Josh is Joshua. But if your name is Margaret, you go by Sissy. Don't put Sissy on there. Make sure you put your correct address, your correct date of birth, and then just sign it as you normally would. We're not handwriting experts. Our staff are not handwriting experts. They are only looking for really gross discrepancies. So for all those who are afraid of absentee ballots being tossed out due to mismatched signatures, I can say that in the primary in March, less than 5 in the entire county were rejected due to mismatched signatures. So we always make sure to side with the voter if at all possible. It's only, again, if there's a gross discrepancy in the signatures. And by that point, it's been checked by the staff, the poll workers, and then also the election commissioners before it gets to that point. But as far as I think the question was voters in early voting or on election day, no votes are rejected during early voting or election day. Everyone is free to vote. No voters are ever turned away. If your name does not pop up in the poll book and they can't find you, you are still allowed to vote, and that's called a provisional ballot. So then that provisional ballot is then checked by the clerk's office to see what the missing information is there and why you're not included in the poll book. A lot of times it's due to a recent address change, or you just got married, or you got a divorce, or your name changed, and it's just not updated in the poll book. And for those that are rejected, that are provisional ballots, it's normally because they're not registered to vote, or they don't even live in that county. But on election day and in early voting, no voter is turned away. There are no rejection rates for that.
And there was a suggestion by President Trump of people who vote by mail also show up at the polling site. Will that immediately be detected at that time, or if it's a close race, is that when that might be discovered?
No, so since that's a very good question. Since the absentee ballots are being mailed out tomorrow, if you go to vote during early voting or the day of, when you are looked up in the poll book, which we now have electronic poll book, so that makes that kind of lag issue I spoke about earlier kind of a moot point because those can be updated daily. They will see that your name is flagged, that you have applied for an absentee ballot. So they will know then that you voted absentee, and you will be encouraged to go ahead and vote absentee because that's what you applied for. Now, if you do insist on voting, you will be allowed to vote because, again, we don't reject any ballots, but that will be a provisional ballot. And then we will keep that provisional ballot and have that on the side. And then when election day comes along, we will see if we received your absentee ballot. And if we did, then that will be counted. And if we didn't receive an absentee ballot from you, then we will count your provisional.
And I heard on...
So you can vote one time. You can't vote twice.
Okay. And I heard on NPR today the legal staffing is already being beefed up by political parties all over the state being ready for anything. Is the Pulaski County Election Commission taking any particularly unusual steps ahead of this election? I know you've only been on for a year, but anything particularly out of the ordinary?
Not so much. One of the commissioners has requested there to be poll watchers from the State Board of Election Commissions, and that's pretty typical. So we will have some kind of neutral third-party poll watchers there. However, our process is completely transparent. Our room where we, pre-COVID, unfortunately, but because of COVID, we can't have folks in there. But normally, when we're processing the ballots, the room in the back is glass, and you could look through, and if there were anyone present at the meeting, they could actually watch as all the votes are being tallied. So, nothing out of the ordinary, I would say, as far as beefing up poll watchers or anything like that. I mean, we honestly have been very proactive in Pulaski County as far as making sure we had enough poll workers and taking those safety measures. We have over 750 gallons of hand sanitizer. We're providing pens and styluses to all the voters so that we're minimizing all those touch points. So you will be given, your own pen that you can keep. You have a stylus when you vote electronically, and then all those machines are being wiped down by our poll workers after every use, and all our poll workers will be wearing gloves and masks. So we've been very proactive in Pulaski County. I don't anticipate any issues outside of just what's already the challenges being caused by COVID-19.
I think I'm like a lot of people, just nervous. 20 years ago, just a personal perspective, I was working as a reporter in South Florida, and I saw the hand recount of the old punch cards, and I know it won't be like that, but just the thought of an election being dragged out potentially for weeks, again, is pretty unnerving. We've covered a lot of ground, and I know not all of you have had a chance to speak. Kristin, I know you've got this very thorough document, and we have a link to it. Anything that you feel we haven't addressed?
Well, I just want people to know that they can find that voter guide online at uaex.edu/ballot. And I believe you shared that link a couple times. And that printed voter guides will be available in all of the cooperative extension offices across the state, in all 75 offices by the beginning of October. So I would just suggest people, either download it or go to their extension office and pick up a voter guide. You've mentioned it is a little bit extensive, but that's because it includes the issues that have now been struck by the courts. So I just encourage people to look at those, issue 1, issue 2, and issue 3, so that they can see a lot of the background and the context what supporters say, what opponents say, what a yes vote means, or I'm sorry, what a for vote means or an against vote means. And they can actually read the ballot title in full there. So it's a great way to do some research ahead of Election Day, ahead of early voting, or you get your absentee ballot in the mail and you can go get that voter guide online right now and do your homework and do some research.
One more question. Valerie Gifford asks, what is the cutoff date for mailing in your ballot, since there will be 3 extra days for the mail-in ballots to be received? Joshua?
Yeah, so it has to be received by November 3rd. So I would actually suggest you go ahead and send it in as early as possible. Don't sit on it. And also, you can always deliver it in person to the clerk's office. So if you don't feel comfortable with the mail service and it getting there in time, you can hand deliver it in person to the clerk's office as well.
Gil Sarmartino asks, if issue 3 passes, how will we compare to other states? Anyone know?
I know a little bit, Michael. We obviously will still be a state with direct democracy, so we will stand out in that regard. But we will go from being one of the states which is more accessible in terms of access to the ballot through the petition process to one of the more complicated states. So we will move significantly, but we will still remain a state with the access to direct democracy. So I think that's worth noting. I just want to praise Kristen's product. That it is just truly fantastic. It's a real gift. Every 2 years, she puts so much energy into getting it right in a nonpartisan way. I just think it's a great gift. In fact, other states do have voter guides that go out to voters, states like Colorado, et cetera. I think ours is the one that Kristen produces is one of the best in the country. I do wish every voter got one because I think it would improve the process. I think that's one of our flaws as a direct democracy state, and that we don't have that kind of mandatory information that goes out to all voters so that they can be their best when it comes to knowing what they're voting on.
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate that.
And it is available as a PDF on the link that we shared, 44 pages printed out, but very thorough. Well, that sounds like a nice tone to wrap up the evening on. So thank you to all of our participants and to those of you watching. We do appreciate your time and hope you will get out and take part in this election. I'm Michael Hibblen, Kinney Hall, Kristen Higgins, Preston Eldridge, Jay Barth, Joshua Price, Melissa Fults. Thank you all so much for joining us.